The Right Honourable Dame Janice Pereira is a trailblazer in every sense. As the first female Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and now a Privy Councillor, her remarkable career has shattered barriers and transformed the region's legal landscape. Her leadership has been instrumental in modernizing the judiciary, with innovations such as the e-litigation portal, which has enhanced access to justice across the Caribbean. Her journey from North Sound Virgin Gorda to becoming one of the most respected legal figures in the Caribbean is a testament to her brilliance, determination, and commitment to justice. Her many accolades, including being named Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2013, and her recent appointment as a Privy Councillor in August 2024, speak to her far-reaching impact. Today, we have the unique opportunity to sit down with Dame Janice, where it all began in her hometown of Virgin Gorda, to hear firsthand about her journey, the challenges she's faced, and the legacy she is creating in the Eastern Caribbean legal system.
Dame Janice, we are on our way to Virgin Gorda, your home. And in many ways, this was a normal commute for you.
It was.
What does the commute mean for you and I guess many other Virgin Gordians?
Okay, so basically it meant a way, of coming to Tortola to do your shopping. I think in those days you looked forward to a trip to the bigger island of Tortola, and it also meant that this is where you would commute and go to school, return home maybe every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The boats were simply at that time too slow to say that you could do that trip every day. And in any event, there wasn't a daily ferry at that time.
So, you say too slow, because now it's about a half an hour roughly. Back then...
Those days you were on the sea for about 2.5, at least 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So much different.
Yes.
Did you enjoy that aspect of it?
The slower boats, not so much. But when we were able to take smaller boats and faster, the ones that were faster, that was an adventure. It felt like an adventure, yes.
And you saw the development of, I guess, the way that you were able to travel back and forth, improving.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes. You saw that over time, where the boats became more regular in terms of the frequency and so on, to where we are today. We have so many hours in between where you can take a ferry from Tortola to Virgin Gorda and Virgin Gorda back. Yes.
And was it free? So you mentioned coming over for school, because you lived on Tortola for your high school years.
Yes.
Was it a free trip, or you still had to find the money to be back and forth?
You had to find the money to be back and forth, yes.
So not everyone was as privileged to have that opportunity?
Definitely not. I think for most parents on Virgin Gorda at the time, it was a challenge in terms of making ends meet, but at the same time recognizing the importance of having your child have that potential and that opportunity. So really not everyone had that opportunity. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
And you? I was watching TV. When you're on TV.
That's when you watch me, eh?
I was when I was watching.
So we're here on Virgin Gorda.
Yes. All this was not like this, of course. So I suppose if one was recording over time to see the development and the changes, yes. But essentially, it was in this location.
The same location.
Yes.
And how we saw the persons getting the stuff they would have bought
yes,
on Tortola
that's
over.
right.
That would have been the same thing back then.
Yes, they would have been doing the same thing. Yes.
And your family did the same? And
they did the same, yes.
how does it feel to even be back on Virgin Gorda?
Always great. Because Virgin Gorda is That's my place. That's my home. That's where I belong.
And so is the less pressure to not be Dame Janice, and it's just Janice for many people when you see them in the
Exactly,
community?
because there's, so many friends, family members, relatives, and so on. So it just feels just home. Home amongst, your people.
So we're ready to explore Virgin Gorda.
Yes.
How did you fall in like in terms of children? Which number?
Which number am I? I am the middle child. Yes, so I had 2 older sisters and 1 older brother, 2 younger sisters, 1 younger brother. Middle child.
That was a packed house.
Yes, it was. It was. But, with large families and closely knit families, it was just enjoyable, happy.
And you're the middle child, so
That's
naturally,
right.
middle children, we do our own thing.
Yes.
Whenever we are on our own.
That's right. Yes, we do our bit, and like my parents' house was like central in the village,
Okay.
and we didn't have locked doors. All the doors would be open, and all the children in the village would come to our house to play.
So your
So
house
they
was
had-
the
was
house.
the meeting place.
Okay.
Yes.
And what was like your favorite thing to do?
Those days.
Yeah, in those days.
Well, we used to play lots of games outside. We used to do lots of skipping competitions. We used to do cricket. And I don't know if you knew these, they used to have these carts that they made. And I think they would have the cover of the paint pans or whatever around. So they would make these carts and they would roll the carts down the hill, and they would have a sort of a wooden stick as the brake
Okay.
for stopping it. I used to, play all those sorts of games. It was sort of really quite funny thinking back on it. Yes. And then we used to do a lot of swimming. We used to go to the beach a lot and, go picking lots of fruits, particularly in the summer.
So you're from Norton.
Yes.
So was there a disconnect sort of? Because Norton is further out. So coming to Valley was more of a
Yes.
trip.
And at that time too, there was a time when you had really no motorable road between the valley and the North Sound. You had sort of what would have been, like a path
Okay.
where persons would walk, but no motorable road was cut until, quite a few years later.
So you would trek the hill.
We hardly ever did that. My father would,
So you never did that.
So you did by ferry.
Oh,
You
okay.
did
So
mainly
you would
by
catch the
ferry.
ferry from
Yes.
Norton to Valley.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. My sister. Okay. So we can come out now. Where are the others now? Oh, see where they went? Hello, 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 hello.
But where he was all the time, eh?
I was outside.
Hello, darling.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good, good, good. How are you?
Not too bad.
You're
Is your
on
sister looking good?
Yes.
It's not older sister.
You're on camera now, see?
I didn't think I would go on camera. Kamalji, this is our sister
Hello.
Zelda.
How are you?
Yes.
Kamalji? Nice to meet you.
Yes. But the jetty was here, and it would go around. That was what we call gunpoint.
Okay.
So we would go around there and continue going. If we're going to the valley or we're going to Tortola.
So you were pretty close to it.
Oh, yes.
You could see
Mm-hmm.
what was going
You
on.
could see everything that was going on. Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Jungle is your big husband.
Yes.
I guess I don't want to pay for the bill too. You paying for the bill?
I'm not seeing
What, Take's house?
Yes. It would
See, Take's house
be.
used to be, would be right here, so by from the
It would
roadside,
be
right in here.
somewhere in there. I'm not quite.
Yeah, because Mr. Frank was right there. So you see,
Frank was
where
there.
that long line come down right there. So like where there's a thing,
Yes.
Granny house would be around somewhere right in there.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty close.
Look at these houses that's going up over here.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that one is a what?
That's a massive one.
A
over there.
massive one there.
Behind the titles and accolades, Dame Janice Pereira's greatest strength has always been rooted in family. Growing up in a close-knit community in Virgin Gorda, she shared a deep bond with her siblings. The values of hard work, determination, and community that Dame Janice learned from her family remain central to who she is today. Her sisters Zelda and Eunice had plenty of wonderful things to share about her achievements, reflecting on how her determination and strong will were evident even in childhood, where she constantly pushed herself to excel and rise above challenges.
What kind of child was Dame Janice?
Oh, she was nice. A nice little girl. And when everybody loved her, you know, and she used to play with all of us and things like that. And I could remember, I used to make her remember to stitch nice little dresses on my hand. And she loved the dresses so much that only then she wanted to put on. And my mother say, it's like every time this little dress wash, that's all she wants to put on. And that's the little dress I had made for her on my hand. But as a child growing up, she was very nice. She was quiet. And like now, as you know, she can talk and she still don't talk.
So that has remained.
That has remained. And as far as I know, she never used to get into the fights and things like me. So she, and I remember her going to school, right? She going to school. She come back, she's still in book. And I'm like, why she always in the books all the time. You know, she gonna go in, she gonna go in a book, she come out, she play. Little chance she get, she in some book. Nobody bothered about that. You never know what's up here in her head and things like that. And my mother was a big disciplinarian, let me tell you. And you had to do your homework. And mother would make sure that we get all the little tools we need. And our father too. When my father go to St. Thomas and come back, he gonna bring the books, the pencils, ruler, pen, ink. I could remember when I give my father my list, he come back with a whole heap of things. And he gonna bring for everybody, you know. So, but my mother was the one with the pushing, you know, making sure.
Education.
Yes, education is a must. But my father is the one who will work and bring everything in so that we would have all the stuff that we need and everything like that.
I used to wonder sometimes she actually tasted the food that was put before her because her head never came out of books. So the food is here, she's eating, but her eyes never move from
the books.
She was always that studious, always. And because of that, I told myself, if that's what it takes to be a lawyer, I don't need it. No. Her eyes never left the book. One of the things I remember, I was quite young, but my mom always instilled all of us about education, as my sister was saying. And my mother lived for the day when it was our last day of school, because that's the day they used to speak about promotions in school. So she used to start from the youngest up. And her thing was, she didn't care once it did come, you had to come at least first or second. She didn't want anything below that from any of us. So she would start from the youngest one up. Okay, Janet, what did she come in school? First. Norris, first. Eunice, and it came up. And by the time she was finished, her hat that she was wearing would end up somewhere below the bank in one of her fence because she was so joyous. She was
My
so
mother
happy.
used to throw the hat.
Throw the hat.
That's why I laugh.
And she said, you know, it was one of those things because the pride that her children was succeeding. And I remembered when Jan got the opportunity to go to high school, and that was one of our detriments because we had to pay to live in people's homes to go to Tortola. We didn't have a high school in Virginia at that time. So unless your parents were making good money, you couldn't get to high school how you wanted to get to high school. So she went to high school, and I would have followed right after her, but the two of us could not go at the same time. So I actually ended up going to high school when she was in her last year of high school.
Oh, wow.
You've got the parents had to pay.
That you stagger it in a
That's
sense.
right.
You
Yeah.
stagger it.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to stagger. Yes.
Yes.
Are you seeing her now making these strides professionally? How do you feel knowing that this is your sister?
Oh my God.
I feel good. I'm so happy for her. I feel good, and I hear me. My little sister, you know, she's going to Privy Council. So I told those girls, I say, when you're looking for me, I got to go England, you know, because my sister is going to Privy Council up to see the king, and I have to go. I have to go. Set me up. I have to go. You know, I feel so elated. I was so happy for my sister. I jump up and I say, wow, she going to Privy Council. It was so good.
What about you?
Wow.
And
I think when I got the headline, I was actually in a meeting and I said, excuse me, I'm like, yes! And then like, Mrs. Crawford, I said, I'll tell you all in a little bit, but yes! And then my phone started going crazy at the office because everybody might know the news is coming up and everybody was, oh girl, yes, I'm so proud. And then everybody was like, oh, this girl talking about a final time. Look at the timing. I said, God, it's good. Oh,
you know,
sister.
I said,
And I'll tell you something, not because you sis, but one of the things that we used to come up against, even coming to Tortola to high school, you know, so unfortunately we used to come up against certain teachers who would tell you, ask the question, can anything good come from rock? We used to call it wrong rock.
Oh, okay.
So, valedictorian, went on to be a lawyer, went on to be Chief Justice, now gone into Privy Council. Yes! Something good comes from the wrong rock.
I was so
Okay?
proud.
So it was like, I looked at it from the broader picture. I said, this is great for the territory. This is excellent for the territory. Because when they think we're so small, we're still on the map. They said a lot. So I was totally elated with the news. I think when they see me jumping up, everybody wanted to know, like, okay, Mrs. Crawford, what's the celebration? I say, yeah, I'll share it all in a bit, but give me this moment. So yes.
What do you think your parents would say to see how
The
you
same
turn
thing I
out?
was saying. The same thing I was saying. I say, I wonder what my mother and father would say.
Yeah.
Our mother and father would say to this. I said, my mother would throw her hat over the back again.
That's right.
She would throw her hat over the back again. You know? And my mother, always proud of
Should have been
her.
proud.
Yes.
Telling you.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
the one thing is when she was actually named Chief Justice and we had a celebratory service simile here in Northstown.
Oh,
My
okay.
mother was able to be present
Okay.
when that happened.
Okay.
Yes.
That she was there, she came up.
So she was in some way able to still
She was
experience
able
that.
to see it.
And what did that mean for you?
Everything. I have sometimes reflected on the fact that, you know, knowing our mother and how she was so keen about, you know, education, and she felt like this was the gateway to everything that you could accomplish. And she would always drill, look, I would have loved to have these opportunities.
Yes.
But you know what she was? No one could argue more than her, you know. When she held a point. As my sister said, she was the disciplinarian.
Oh, yes.
And an avid reader.
Yes, by lamplight. Because in the days of no electricity,
She read
Oh, she loved
novels. She
Oh,
loved, yes.
And that passed on to you, it seems.
Probably because she read all the Perry Masons. She watched all of these. There were these other things, and there was a favorite one she loved that would be on the
Confession.
radio. Portia Faces Life.
Life.
It was about a lawyer, and she couldn't miss a session of that.
But
Yes.
she always going to the best for her children.
Yes.
Always.
Mhm.
Now, what advice do you have for your sister as she steps into this new role?
Advice?
Mhm.
Keep her head on as usual and do what she gotta do.
How about you, Mrs. Crawford?
Well, I know she will do well. She's always focused. She is well read. And I have no doubt she will continue to do an exemplary job in whatever she does. That's just who she is as a person. It's just who she is. She always wants the best. And she is fair. I tell you truthfully, there were many times I used to tease her when I was here with the boxes of cases, and I'm like, you really have to read all that? She said, girl, yes. And her preparation, so I have no doubt she will continue this in this role as well. And she will show what she's really made of in this position.
As the afternoon progressed, the sisters reminisced about their childhood, recalling the songs they sang while caroling through the streets of Virgin Gorda. In that moment, Dame Janice was completely at ease and at home, revealing a side of herself that few ever get to see.
Merry Christmas comes again. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Children raise their voice and sing. We're singing another merry song tonight. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah tonight. Ring and shine the merry, merry bell. Ring and shine your Christmas bell. Ring and shine your merry, merry bell. Ring and shine your Christmas bell.
We used to sing and play and dance up in the yard. All of us.
Yep.
Just cut it off the bun.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh dear.
Back at who you were as a student. What kind of student would you think they would say?
Oh my
you were?
goodness. One of my favorite teachers was Jenny Weathley. I know that she's passed now, but she was my English teacher, but she used to sort of put the fear of God in us. And yet we loved her. We really loved her because she was so kind. She would just tell you these things. And one time I'm getting ready to take my exam and she says, Janice, now don't go in there and put an S wherever your stomach tells you. That was the kind of teacher she was. And then she said that when it was, for example, doing the words receive, believe, and I would mix up the E's and the I's, I couldn't because she used to make me feel just so totally embarrassed. She would make me feel to say, child, I hope that you now can spell believe and receive. Well, better spell it, right? Yeah, so she was really great, and you know, she would still bring things like pumpkin pie, you know, for the students.
This way.
Yes. I have observed you for almost close to 5 years. Aren't you going to grow? But she was the best. She was the best.
The day wouldn't be complete without revisiting the early days of her formal education. We visited Dame Janice's Stage 1 teacher, Mrs. Gracia Stevens, who saw her potential at a tender age. Teacher Gracie's commitment to Dame Janice's early education played a key role in nurturing the foundation of her journey.
Teacher Gracie was your first teacher.
My very first teacher, Stage 1.
Stage 1.
Yes.
And which school?
of what was then the North Sound Primary School.
In North Sound Primary School.
Yeah.
Teacher Gracie, what do you remember about, again, Janice George then? What do you remember about her then?
Well, Janice George came to school about 5 years old, but I knew her 5 years before then. I knew her from the day she was born. And in that same year, I was appointed as they used to call them student teachers then, by my headmaster was Mr. Obed Malone from Pathouse Bay and Total. He very much wanted me to be a teacher. I didn't want to be. But I found out later that that was really my calling. So I started out in 1962. And my first class, well, that wasn't my very first class. It was my first class as a teacher. But Mr. Malone, since I had gone over 15 years in school, I had nothing else to do. I had no higher grades to go. He used to use me to teach the little ones when he couldn't make it down to them, because in those years we didn't have a teacher per class. So I was a little accustomed of teaching, so apparently he saw that in me. So on that first day, my class, I taught 3 classes. Stage 1, Stage 2, and Class 1. So I had all those little ones to teach in a one-room primary school, which was also used as a church on Sundays. So among those students was this little short student by the name of Janice George. She wasn't living very far from the school, and her mom and I were best friends. Okay, so she came in, but somehow I noticed that she was a little different. She never talked too much. And she was always like, she was deep in thought, but never talked too much. I noticed that she was very bright from the very first day. And there she was continued, she passed. If I remember well, I think she was first in the class in all of those classes that I had, until she left class 1 to go to class 2. She had a
different teacher.
Yes. But she was an adorable little girl with her long plaits and very obedient, soft-spoken. I don't think those have left her yet. Yes, so that was the first. Those were the first years with her.
And then, Janice, what do you remember about Teacher Gracie?
Oh, well, I remember her because, your teacher was like this mentor. And so we were using slates at the time, and she would be in front of the class, and she was, giving us the instructions. But I always liked her. She was very kind, very helpful. That's what I remember about her, just that teacher that you looked up to, really looked up to.
And Teacher Gracie, did you follow her educationally as she progressed?
Yes, I did. Because she was such a bright student, you had to notice her going from class to class until she left Robinson, until she left that primary school. Yes.
And as she then transitioned into high school and now moving to Tortola,
Yes.
Did you keep up with her?
Of course. Yes, I kept up with her, and then she would come home at times, and as I told you, her mom and I were best friends, so I always be in that house.
So it was always Teacher Gracie.
Yes, Teacher Gracie like him.
As she moves into this new position.
It's a new position, but I firmly believe that she's qualified, and that she will. When you get in a new position, you learn as you go. And I am confident that she's still a keen and sharp learner, and that she's going to do very well made herself, her family, country, and me very, very proud of her. Yes.
Teacher
We are
Bessie.
waiting to hear.
Very well,
in this,
Teacher
in this
Bessie.
new role, we are waiting to hear. And we are waiting to hear nothing but good news. Because I'm just confident that she's going to be there.
Dame Janice, what does it feel like having someone who remembers you from way back then be able to still experience these accomplishments that they had a hand in?
I can tell you words cannot express, honestly. I mean, just the thought that she is still here.
Yes.
And as I remember her, you know, always pleasant, helpful, the kind of teacher where there is that interest in the child, not about the job, but about teaching and really, truly having that deep connection with children. Those were the kind, you know, she was that kind of teacher, and who followed you, encouraged you, and was, you know, happy as if, you know, you would think that she was a mother of all of us, but she was as happy as our mother would be when we succeeded.
Excellent. Teacher Bessie, thank you so much. As our time with Dame Janice winds down, we find ourselves at the heart of where her passion for law truly took shape, surrounded by the very books and cases that have inspired her extraordinary career. Dame Janice, we are in the law library, a significant part, I would say, in your journey in the legal field. What does a law library signify for you?
For me, a place where you know where the law is, where to find the law. No lawyer would be expected, of course, to know everything there is and as it were, keep it in one's head. And so the library is where you go, whether physical library or a library online. That's where you find the law.
And if we were to take it back further, in your early days, technology was perhaps not as advanced as it is now. What did that do for you in creating the type of lawyer that you thought you would be?
I always liked visiting the library, and I recall we had a course. This was at the University of the West Indies. It was doing a case study, and when you did a case study, you basically would have an issue. You would write what those issues were, explain what the case was about and what the result was. So I thought that was really a very good program, and you did a lot of research on that in the library, in the law library. At the time, many physical books. Now, many law libraries are online.
The bar, and you're now moving back home to the Virgin Islands. Did you have an idea of the contributions that you wanted to make towards the development of the territory?
Well, I think at the time, I think most persons or young persons and become passionate, particularly I think about criminal law and what they perceive in terms of how criminal law affects persons, accused, victims, and so on. So that was, I think, at the beginning, sort of the passion. And then you realize that it's an entire broader aspect of, you know, life and what society is, that you are surrounded, in essence, without realizing that you are surrounded by law, basically, in every phase of your development. Society is in large measure about the law. We have regulations about everything. If you think about it, your life is regulated from the moment that you're born. You have to be registered and have a birth certificate. You have to be identified and so on. We are told which side of the road to drive. We are told, you know, the rules and regulations about school, about institutions. So it sort of regulates and it's around you even if you're not thinking necessarily about it.
And you were called in 1981.
In 1981.
And you went into private practice.
Not immediately. In 1981, I became the acting registrar general and the registrar of companies here in the Virgin Islands. And from there, I did that for about 4.5 years. And then after that, went into private practice.
What was that experience like?
As registrar, it was, I think, a place where you learned again. It was the registrar of births, it was the registrar of deaths, it was the registrar of marriage. I conducted many marriages all over the territory. In fact, I learned more about the territory when I was a registrar conducting marriages, corporate law as well. And one of the interesting parts I thought about registrar at the time was the registrar of the Supreme Court and being also the Admiralty Marshal. I think my first challenge was the arrest of a huge cargo vessel in the Virgin Islands with a crew on it. So I had to learn very fast how to deal with that.
And learning very fast. That seemed to have been, I guess, a theme in your life. Not necessarily wanting to do anything or setting out to do anything, but it's sort of having persons speak life into you. I remember reading from your biography, the late Honourable Ralph O'Neill saying that he thinks that you'll be the next Chief Justice. What was that like for you in that moment?
I thought that it was fascinating because I hadn't seen myself as becoming, the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court at that time. So I suppose he had a vision that I did not have. And I suppose in a way he has proven to be prophetic because it came true that after joining the court, I then eventually became Chief Justice. So it was quite, inspiring for me, as well as seeing it as something like a challenge, because in a way that it was, you are now, as it were, charting a new course from being a lawyer in private practice to now being on the bench and dispensing justices between, individuals rather than representing one side of the story.
Now, if you were to take me back to the early days when you were a judge, is there a particular case that really cemented your idea of wanting or feeling as though you had made that right decision?
Yes, sometimes there are many. Cases, of course, they pose different challenges. Cases that come before you, the first thing you will know, behind every case is a real person. And I think it is important that we see not just the case, but the person or persons who may be impacted or affected by the particular matter. So as it relates to criminal law, I recall on this occasion a young boy, a youth. He was just about age 17, and he was charged. I think there was a dispute. Young persons, they get into altercations, and the result of that altercation was that another young man died. And he came before me as a trial judge, and the question was whether he should be granted bail. At the time, in terms of precedents for granting bail for murder, that was simply not the practice. And so I had to really decide whether this was an appropriate case where this young man could be granted bail and not take his liberty away at that stage of the proceedings. And I was satisfied that I ought to grant bail, but I was also aware that in doing so, I was deviating from what the practice and norm was. And what I did was I granted bail, granted full reasons, setting out why he ought to be granted bail in the circumstances. And the result of that was that many other judges felt comfortable. And of course, it built the practice where it was not merely, as it were, automatic that a person accused of murder would simply not be granted bail.
And you were appointed the first female Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. What were your initial thoughts about that appointment?
Well, the first thing I think in terms of taking on that kind of position was one, you are aware that it's the first time that a woman is holding this role. And what that meant, the question was how society sees a woman in that role. So that was something that I am always and have been mindful of. But nonetheless, I felt that I was quite capable of doing, the job of Chief Justice. I won't say that it wasn't daunting. I think if you're going to take any role seriously, then you have to be aware of what those responsibilities are and understand that the role that you are now taking on, the breadth of that, as well as all the areas that it covers in terms of the various states. And so when I became Chief Justice, I was very, very aware that it was quite a responsibility to perform in that role.
And were there challenges with some men who did not, see that a woman should be in that position? How did you navigate those challenges?
Yes, indeed. One typical example of that, I think, is sometimes perhaps a lawyer thinking that they didn't understand what you say. So you are very aware that there is a bit of whether, I think implicit gender bias, because sometimes we ourselves are not aware of our unconscious biases, but also knowing that perhaps the male judge may ask the same question and it is understood readily. So you would navigate that not by calling anyone out, but simply, I think, by demonstrating that you do know as much as your male counterpart.
And do you feel a responsibility to bring other women along with you?
Yes, why not? As far as I'm concerned, I think women are capable and should never, ever consider themselves as being less capable of doing law, being a magistrate, being on the High Court bench, being on the Court of Appeal, or becoming Chief Justice.
And the role of Chief Justice involves some judicial responsibilities as well as significant administrative duties. How did you manage to balance between presiding over cases and overseeing the administration of the courts?
Quite a balance, because they're both very important and time-consuming tasks. The Court of Appeal of the Eastern Caribbean it's a very busy court. As Chief Justice, I'm also the president of the Court of Appeal and was the president. And I enjoyed, of course, sitting and hearing appeals. And you then have to balance, of course, sometimes after hearing an appeal, that you have administrative duties to attend to in relation to appointments of judges, appointments of other legal officers across the various states and territories, as well as the operation of the court itself, which is headquartered in St. Lucia. And so you had to basically know what the time frames were for the various tasks that you needed to perform, and also that the staff that was at headquarters was ably assisting you in that role.
Now, you've advocated for magistrates to be overseen, the appointment of magistrates to be overseen by the National Judicial and Legal Services Commissions rather than the executive. What prompted that stance?
For me, it is simple. The magistracy is a part of the judiciary. So even though historically and up to now, the magistracy, the appointments come about, as it were, by way of the executive, it is something which runs counter to, the separation of powers. I think in the Eastern Caribbean, we are a bit of an outlier in that regard, because in other Caribbean states, the magistracy, they are part of the higher or wider judiciary. And it accords with the principle of independence of the judiciary, and it accords with the principles of the separation of powers.
And in doing so, you feel as though what benefits would it derive?
Well, I think it would benefit in terms of the independence of the judiciary from the perception of the public and how the public perceives the administration of justice. And also, I think in terms of magistrates feeling more a part of the wider judiciary than they now feel.
Okay. And your appointment again as Chief Justice, it broke many glass ceilings. What advice would you offer young women aspiring to leadership roles in what is deemed more traditionally male-dominated fields? What
Well,
advice would you give them?
I recall, I think early, that was when I was just about to study law. There was a question asked of me in terms of whether I was able to, as it were, just understand, law, that it was hard, it was difficult. My view was that everyone can do it, whether it's male or female. And so the advice I would have for young lawyers is that you follow your dreams, you follow your passion, and I firmly believe in equality, and that everyone, irrespective of sex or gender, should be treated equally.
And you were pretty instrumental in technology in the courts, primarily with the e-litigation portal. Why did you see the need for that?
Well, I believe it started here in the BVI. That was when we brought in the International Business Companies Act, and we separated the corporate registry from the High Court registry. At that time, there was this room, computers with these huge machines that was sort of stuck in the back of the room. But I was always interested in the young staff who were inputting the data to make it easier for that to be retrieved and to be able to search that data. And also, when I was registrar, I recall that the headquarters of the court seemed just very remote from, as it were, the mainstream and all of the states that it served. Yes, the judges of the Court of Appeal, they came to the territory, but it always seemed as if you were disassociated from the headquarters, although you were submitting files, records to the headquarters and so on. And I thought, what is needed is a system where it's more rounded, it's more inclusive, and it is connected. And so the idea was that we needed to find a solution where we could connect all 9 states, all courtrooms, all court offices to the, as it were, the nucleus of the court. It would make for greater efficiency. It means you can really see what is happening faster in each state. And it means also that you were able to communicate a lot easier with staff, registrars from across the 9 states and territories. And also, the e-litigation portal was a drive to find a solution to all the paper-based systems that we had. Paper means a lot of room. And I recall there were, at headquarters, for example, you would have a room this large, even larger, and it would be filled to the roof with boxes of documents and files and paper. And so it was finding a system where you could file electronically, you could search it electronically, you could retrieve that data electronically, and you can walk with it instead of having to take a plane with 7 or 8 boxes per judge traveling from state to state. So it was really about building efficiency, redundancy, reliability, and sustainability in the court processes across the 9 states.
And we see how technology was able to do that. What role do you think technology will continue to play as it advances over time? We see now artificial intelligence. Do you see that taking space in that process?
Oh, it will. It will. I don't think there is any going back in relation to artificial intelligence. It, I think, will pose, challenges for the court. But that is why it is important, I think, for, judicial officers to be aware, to be versed as well as they can be in relation to meeting that challenge. They will meet that challenge, I think, eventually in terms of, evidence and how they treat with evidence, whether it's evidence of things that we would normally have had, for example, whether it is DNA evidence, whether it is photographs, whether it's fingerprints, all of these things that are part and parcel of what we know in terms of identification evidence in relation to crimes or proving a crime. Artificial intelligence is taking us in that direction. And it takes us in a direction where one will have to discern what is fake and what is authentic, because it will pose a real problem. I think we have seen that already, where you have, deep fakes of persons appearing on the internet. The same challenges it will pose for judges and coming up with solutions in terms of how you're able to prove that that piece of evidence is authentic. Because at the end of the day, that's really what court proceedings are about. Authenticity and proving that it came from an authentic source.
So do you think that judges now have to, or will arrive at a space where they have to be a bit more technologically savvy? Because I think in many instances, it's, yes, you can dabble on an iPad, but now you have to be so consumed by it in order to allow this to work. Will that pose a challenge, you think?
I think that because it may be something where it is necessary, I mean, what you find now is that legal practitioners currently, they are really very tech savvy. And so they're already moving with the changes as they happen. And so similarly, judges, I think, as judges come on and younger persons come on, you will find that they are aware and they know how to basically navigate those types of technology. I think a lot easier than, let us say, judges of yesteryear. So I think they will be themselves ready for the challenge, merely because of life and living through those technological changes that have been taking place.
This may be a bit out the box, but do you think we'll arrive at a place where there won't be a physical person that an individual has to stand before, if you will, and you will have cases being heard predominantly by artificial intelligence, and that program, whatever it is, would decide the outcome.
That's already being discussed in terms of whether, AI persons will, as it were, take the role of judges and decision makers. I think to some extent there is definitely a role in certain types of cases, but I don't foresee that AI, or whether it's an AI bot, will be able, as it were, to take the role of the natural judge, because unless they begin really thinking and having, as it were, deeper thoughts, reflective thoughts, because sometimes there may be a matter and you may be able to think, well, these rules dictate this answer, or these rules dictate another answer. And then there is the middle ground where there is that idea called discretion that comes from feelings, your thoughts, your deeper thoughts, your experiences that come together and build out, what that judicial officer means. For example, in many respects, an officer may be called upon to exercise a discretion. And that has a lot to do with sometimes just the feel, the look, and also bringing all of your experience to bear, from within your society, your surrounds, and determining perhaps what the just response or the just result should be.
And you've now transitioned into the Privy Council.
Yes.
Tell me about how that process worked. How did you arrive at that juncture?
Well, I suppose because the Privy Council is the final appellate court for quite a number of our Caribbean states. For the Eastern Caribbean, for example, 2 of our states, the final appellate court is the Caribbean Court of Justice, but the remaining 7, it is still the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. And so appeals from the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal would ordinarily go to the Privy Council. They would, of course, be able to see your work, the decisions that you have made, in review of that work in terms of analysis, how you treated with the matters that came before you. And so I think in terms of having a Caribbean jurist on the Court of Appeal, I think was the sort of logical next step when you consider, your Caribbean space and the fact that this is a court that is your final appellate court, and understanding what the Caribbean and how the Caribbean, or approaches in terms of Caribbean culture, understanding their nuances sometimes of language, nuances in terms of places, and appreciating those places, words, phrases, all I think play a part. And so I was invited and I accepted.
Do you think that there's a pressure? Do you feel a sense of pressure with that? Being the one in the room that has to now speak on behalf of.
Yeah, not quite speaking on behalf, but of course I would think that I'm able to sort of bring a Caribbean perspective to matters that have arisen from Caribbean, or disputes within the Caribbean, albeit, yes, it's a legal dispute. But around all legal disputes, it always happens within a context, whether it's a social context, they all happen within that context. And I am looking forward to it. It will be, I think, new. And as you take on any new role, you do feel, I suppose, a sense of just a bit of anticipation. And I'm simply hoping that all will go well, and I definitely hope to do my best.
I would imagine it wasn't paved with gold. What are some of the challenges that you had to overcome to arrive at this point?
I think when one looks at, I think, women in the law, for example, or starting out as women in the law, there's always the question, of course, in terms of whether you are up to the task and demonstrating that you are up to the task as well as any other. And so you have challenges with regard to that. You may also have challenges with regard to basically the decisions that you take. As women, I think we tend to know or feel that we should be multitasking. I certainly, I think, know how one, as a woman, a professional, but as well as dealing with and having children, that you learn to be caregiver, you learn to be the professional, you learn how you can deal with those different parts of your life and as it were, make it a whole, make it a whole. So in a way, that in itself is a bit of a challenge, but we tend, I think, to do it without really thinking about it in that way. I think in terms of judging and being a judge, you would have the normal challenges of the nature of the cases. There may be cases where you may be thinking that you would prefer, as a woman, that you really don't have to deal with many of those cases. For example, cases that may be dealing with domestic violence or cases that may be dealing with sexual offenses, for example, and how you treat with those, and also ensuring that you are balanced, ensuring that any gender biases that you may have, that you check those biases to ensure that the person who is before you, that you are treating them fairly, and not allowing those unconscious biases to enter into the decision-making process. So there are those kinds of challenges, as well as the normal challenges of life. And I think being a judge, particularly in small societies, and ensuring that you are staying true to your code of ethics, whether you're on the bench or off the bench.
Now, what are some of the challenges, if any, do you anticipate facing in this new role, particularly in balancing the expectations from the region and your new responsibilities in a more global context?
I think, as with any new role, no doubt one would have curves or just growing into the role. But the way I see it is that any new role that one takes on, you will have a period where you, as it were, grow into what is required of you, what is demanded of you. You know, humans, we are humans. I don't think that every decision that one thinks about is necessarily, or it may not be that it's right. I mean, even courts at times, they may take a view on a matter and may later, in other years, consider that perhaps the law took a wrong turn and corrects. So that is the way that I think society flows, and that I think is expected in terms of, you know, human beings. Because at the end of the day, judges. That's what we are. We're human beings.
Your term as Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court has ended.
Yes.
What do you hope that people remember you for in that role?
I think and I hope that persons will remember me for being fair, for being independent, and in some, I suppose, fearless in terms of, the decision-making process, and also as it relates to administrative matters, for that they would remember me as being inclusive.
One of the things, when you look at your career, you never seem to be unafraid to move. It doesn't seem as though you want to stay in a position and hold on to it. It's always, I'll step further, I'll move on. When do you know that it's time to move on?
I remembered, I think, years, this was when I was registrar of the Supreme Court, and after I'd served, 4 years. And at the time I thought, well, whether I had learned and done what this required, and whether I was at a point where I was, as it were, repeating myself. And I think when you get to that stage of feeling that you are simply repeating yourself, then I think you know that it's time that you move to another dimension.
But where else is there to go once you,
I think retirement completely.
you do see retirement
Yes.
on the horizon?
Yes.
And what do you hope to do in that space?
I hope in that space that I could spend more time doing things that I haven't been doing. Just family type things, whether it's gardening, whether it's dealing with other matters that I think we need to look at now, young persons, children, in terms of the things or their perceptions in terms of, their lives and what is there. Is there some way that I could engage, in terms of young people? I really do like engaging with young people. They do have sometimes some interesting questions, and really understand what's required in terms of their moving forward. They are the next generation. And so that they can see their lives in a positive way, rather than perhaps so many instances now where there is such, I would say, a stream, where they are pulled in different directions. And sometimes the question is, which one or what should they be following? And it is very easy, I think, to, get caught up in what looks like sort of instant satisfaction. How do they see themselves in terms of the goals that they have set for themselves and how to get there? Sometimes young persons, you engage them and they will say, well, I just want to be rich or something like that. And if you ask, well, how do you plan to do that? There is sometimes a disconnect in terms of discipline, in terms of perseverance, and sort of understanding that there are values, family values, social values, connections that are important to family, to our community, and not simply being gratified by whatever appears to be instant.
You spoke about family and family being important. With your family, how have they taken to you being in the spotlight, as it were, and them not, or having to, I guess, navigate different spaces because of who you are? Do you hope to apply that sort of pressure? Do you feel like it's a pressure on them as well?
Probably. I hope that they don't feel pressured, but I imagine it can be. I try, I think, in terms of home life, to simply, be home, a homebody, and try to separate the parts where I'm a professional from the person who is at home with family, with a husband, and simply enjoying life.
And who is Dame Janice at home?
Dame Janice at home is a person who loves to laugh, a person who loves to dance, a person who loves to sing, and a person who loves, gardens and flowers and, playing with small children, whether it's nieces and nephews, and chatting with them. Sometimes even learning their games, video games and so on. I don't do too well, but I try to understand it.
As you reflect on your journey, lastly, who would you say are the people that you think of, had it not been for them, I probably wouldn't be here? Who are those people that instantly come to mind?
Many, I think. I think of persons like the late Ralph T. O'Neill. As you said, he had somewhere prophesied that I was going to be Chief Justice. But I think because as representative for Virgin Gorda, he had such a keen interest in seeing persons from the Virgin Islands go and further their education, in terms of thinking that the human resource is what will build your community. I firmly believe that our greatest resource, particularly where you have very scarce natural resources, that our greatest resource is really people, human beings, and having those opportunities to really grow, to have the opportunities where you impact, others and help them to grow, and really being passionate about what you do, giving the best that you can to whatever task you are given, or whatever role you have to play. Do it to the best of your ability. At the end of the day, it's about what you think about yourself, whether you feel satisfied, whether you see yourself in terms of what you have to give, and not where you're doing it merely because it's, whether it's a payday or not caring. I think you must be able to care about what you do. And you must be able to critique yourself and whether you think for yourself that you are giving of your best.
Anyone else?
Other persons, there are many. Some of them not coming to mind immediately, but quite a lot of persons, I think, that's touched my life along the way. You have Dr. Archibald of blessed memory, who I worked with as his associate when I left the registry, and he was a great teacher, great mentor. I think a lot of what I know, I think I can attribute in terms of attention to detail and that willingness to teach that he had. And also, I think that passion for the law. He was a person very passionate about the law. There's also persons like MCW Todman, again of blessed memory, who I had the fortune to work with, and great worker, as well as other associates, my former partner, Mr. Pereira, Mrs. Webster, many persons along the way that I think touched, my life along the journey that I've had. And my predecessor, the former Chief Justice before my time, Sir Hugh Rollins, and other justices on the Court of Appeal. So, quite a number of persons.
If you can inspire one young person who is watching this right now, what would you say to them about trusting the journey, not being afraid to sway from the path that they may have perhaps created in their head? What would you say to them to encourage them to trust the process?
I think I would say to anyone who's listening, firstly, believe in yourself. If you get an opportunity, take it, grab it, and be passionate about what it is that you wish to do with your life. At the end of the day, those decisions are yours and yours alone. This idea that it may be someone else to blame for whatever the result is, that's really not the case. I think you have to decide whether you are going to make your own path and whether you are going to focus on that path that you've chosen. And if you do that, you do it passionately without giving up. There will be challenges along the way. I don't know of any journey where you will not have uphills you go around, but you must be able, I think, with perseverance to navigate, because that makes you a better person. We're only stronger when we take on challenges and we conquer them. That's really how you grow. At least that's what I believe.
Team Janice, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. I do wish you every success in your new role.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
As our journey with Dame Janice comes to an end, we reflect on a life dedicated to breaking barriers, inspiring change, and serving justice with integrity and grace. From Virgin Gorda to the highest courts in the Caribbean, her legacy continues to serve as a beacon of possibility for future generations. Thank you for joining us in celebrating her remarkable story.